In 1986, Lionel Richie stood on the Oscar stage as his song Say You, Say Me won Best Original Song. Just a few years earlier, his album had sold more than 20 million copies, and We Are the World, which he wrote with Michael Jackson, raised $63 million for famine relief in Africa. Everything looked perfect. But not long after that night, doctors warned Richie that he might never sing again. At the same time, his nearly 20-year marriage exploded into a violent scandal that ended with the police involved. Just 4 years before that hospital night, Eminem had reached a place no rapper had ever reached before. In March 2003, the song Lose Yourself from the film 8 Mile won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. It was the first time in history that a hip-hop track had taken home an Oscar. Hollywood had officially opened its doors to a genre that had spent decades fighting for legitimacy. By that point, Eminem was already dominating the music industry. His 2000 album, the Marshall Mathers LP, had sold 1.7 million copies in its first week in the United States alone, setting a record that no solo rapper had ever achieved. 2 years later, The Eminem Show became the best-selling album in the world in 2002. Everywhere he went, the Slim Shady persona exploded across television, radio, and magazines. Millions of fans memorized his lyrics. Critics argued about his words. Politicians condemned him, and yet the numbers kept growing. By the early 2000s, Eminem had become more than a rapper. He was one of the most recognizable entertainers on the planet. But the strange part of the story is this. While the world was watching his rise, the Grammys, the platinum records, the Oscar, something else was quietly happening behind the scenes. The higher Eminem climbed, the more unstable his life was becoming. And eventually, that instability would almost kill him. Lionel Brockman Richie Jr. was born on June 20th, 1949, in Tuskegee, Alabama. It was not a random place to grow up. Tuskegee carried deep historical weight in the United States. It was home to the Tuskegee Institute, one of the most important educational institutions for African Americans in the 20th century. Richie's family lived on the campus of that institute. His father worked as a systems analyst and later a campus administrator, while his mother was a teacher and principal. Education was not just encouraged in the household, it was expected. The atmosphere around Lionel Richie as a child was disciplined and structured. The adults around him believed strongly in responsibility, respect, and achievement. But Tuskegee was also a place full of music. Church choirs, gospel gatherings, and local performances were common parts of community life. Richie grew up surrounded by those sounds. Music was not a distant dream for him. It was simply part of the environment. He learned piano at an early age, watching older musicians and practicing by ear. The artists who shaped his early musical taste were legends of soul and gospel. Voices like Sam Cooke, Ray Charles, and Marvin Gaye filled the air during the 1950s and 60s. Still, Richie did not initially imagine himself becoming a singer. In fact, the thing that gave him the clearest path forward in life was sports. At Joliet Township High School, and later during his college years, Richie became an excellent tennis player. He was good enough to earn a tennis scholarship to Tuskegee Institute, the same campus where he had grown up. At that point, his life could have taken a completely different direction. Richie once considered becoming either a professional tennis player or even a priest. The idea of entering the ministry appealed to him during his teenage years because of his deep exposure to church life. Music was still there, but it was not yet the center of his identity. That changed when Richie entered college. At Tuskegee Institute in the late 1960s, campus life revolved around social gatherings, fraternity events, and parties. Music was always needed for these events. Bands would perform live covers of popular Motown and funk songs. One of those bands was a group of students who played energetic funk music for college parties. They called themselves the Commodores. Richie joined the group not as a singer, but as a saxophone player. At the time, nobody in the band saw him as the frontman. He was simply one of the musicians helping to fill out the sound. The band's early style was heavily influenced by James Brown style funk. Their performances were loud, rhythmic, and energetic. They focused on dancing crowds rather than emotional ballads. But Richie had a different instinct when it came to songwriting. While the rest of the band focused on funk grooves, Richie started writing slow, emotional songs. songs that leaned toward melody and storytelling rather than rhythm alone. At first, the idea created tension inside the group. Many members believed that audiences wanted pure funk, high energy and fast beats. Ballads, they thought, might slow things down too much. Richie believed the opposite. He believed that emotional songs could give the band a broader audience and a deeper connection with listeners. That belief would eventually change the future of the band. During those early years at Tuskegee, the members of the Commodores spent countless nights performing at college events, small clubs, and local parties. They drove long distances in cheap vans. They played wherever they could find a stage. None of them knew yet that they were slowly building something much bigger. By the early 1970s, the Commodores had developed a strong reputation as a powerful live band in the college circuit across the southern United States. And that reputation would soon lead them to an opportunity that could change everything. A chance to sign with Motown Records, one of the most powerful music labels in the world. For Lionel Richie, the young tennis player who had once considered becoming a priest, the path forward was about to change completely. By the early 1970s, the Commodores had built a reputation on the college circuit across the southern United States. They were not famous yet, but they were disciplined, energetic, and increasingly tight as a band. Their breakthrough came when they signed with Motown Records, one of the most powerful music labels in the world at the time. Motown had already created stars like Stevie Wonder, The Temptations, and Marvin Gaye. For a young band from Tuskegee, joining that roster meant entering a completely different level of the music industry. But signing the contract did not immediately change their lives. In fact, the first years were difficult. The Commodores were not treated as stars. They were treated as a support act. One of their earliest major opportunities was joining a national tour as the opening band for Jackson 5. Night after night, they had the same job: warm up the audience before the main attraction. It was a brutal training ground. If the crowd lost interest, the band would feel immediately. If they failed to capture attention, the room would turn cold long before the headliners appeared. Lionel Richie later described those nights as a kind of education that no music school could provide. The band learned how to read a crowd, how to control energy, and how to hold attention even when people were waiting for someone else. Slowly, the experience began to shape their identity as performers. At this stage, Lionel Richie was still not the obvious leader of the group. He played saxophone, helped with arrangements, and occasionally sang. The Commodores' early recordings leaned heavily toward funk, following the influence of artists like James Brown. The music was rhythmic, aggressive, and designed to make audiences dance. Yet Richie kept writing songs that sounded very different. Instead of funk grooves, he wrote melodies that moved slower and carried more emotional weight. Many of those songs were simple, almost fragile compared to the band's energetic style. One of those songs would change everything. In 1977, the Commodores released a ballad written by Lionel Richie called Easy. The song did not follow the typical funk formula that had defined the band's early sound. Instead, it was smooth, reflective, and deeply melodic. Richie's voice carried the song with a relaxed confidence that contrasted with the intensity of their earlier music. To the surprise of many people inside the band, the song became a major hit. Easy climbed the charts and reached a wide audience far beyond the funk crowd. For the first time, listeners began to notice Lionel Richie not just as a band member, but as a songwriter and vocalist. The success of Easy created a shift inside the Commodores. Richie's style of songwriting suddenly seemed valuable. The band followed that direction with another ballad written by him, 3 Times a Lady. Released in 1978, the song became an even bigger success, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The track was originally written by Richie as a tribute to his parents, but it quickly turned into one of the most recognizable love songs of the decade. The Commodores were now known not only for funk, but also for elegant, emotional ballads. And Lionel Richie was clearly at the center of that transformation. As his reputation grew, the music industry began paying attention to Richie beyond the band itself. Producers and artists started approaching him to write songs. His ability to create simple but emotionally powerful melodies made him extremely valuable. One opportunity in particular would expand his influence far beyond the Commodores. Richie wrote a duet called Endless Love for a film soundtrack, He recorded it with Diana Ross, one of Motown's biggest stars. Released in 1981, the song became a massive hit. It spent 9 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and quickly became one of the most famous romantic songs in pop history. But success like that carries consequences. Inside the Commodores, the balance of the group was beginning to change. The band had started as a collective, but now Lionel Richie was becoming the face of their biggest songs. The press mentioned his name more frequently. Record executives recognized that his songwriting had broad crossover appeal, reaching audiences in pop, R&B, and adult contemporary music at the same time. For Richie, this created a difficult question that many artists eventually face. Was he still part of a band's shared identity, or was he already moving towards something else? By the early 1980s, the answer was becoming clear. Lionel Richie was standing at the edge of a new path, one that would soon pull him away from the Commodores and push him into a level of global fame that even he had not fully imagined. By the early 1980s, Lionel Richie had already proven himself as one of the most gifted songwriters in the music industry. Yet the biggest leap of his career was still ahead. In 1982, Richie made the decision that would permanently change his trajectory. He stepped away from the Commodores and launched a solo career. For many artists, leaving a successful band can destroy momentum. Fans often struggle to accept the separation, and the first solo project can easily fail. But Lionel Richie's situation was different. His songwriting had already reached audiences far beyond the band, and the industry understood that he had a rare ability to create music that crossed genres. His first solo album, Lionel Richie, was released in 1982. The record immediately proved that the risk had been worth it. The single truly climbed to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, confirming that Richie's voice and songwriting could succeed outside the band that first made him famous. Still, this was only the beginning. The moment that truly changed everything arrived in 1983 with the release of his second solo album, Can't Slow Down. The title would soon feel prophetic. The album exploded across international charts and became one of the defining records of the decade. It produced several global hits, including All Night Long, Hello, Running with the Night, and Stuck on You. Each song revealed a slightly different side of Richie's musical identity. All Night Long carried a celebratory rhythm influenced by Caribbean sounds. Hello delivered an intimate ballad built around a simple but unforgettable piano melody. Stuck on You blended pop with country influences, showing Richie's ability to move comfortably across musical styles. Together, these songs pushed the album's sales beyond 20 million copies worldwide. The success of Can't Slow Down made Lionel Richie one of the biggest artists on the planet. In 1985, the album won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year, placing Richie at the very center of the music industry. At concerts, arenas filled with thousands of fans who sang along to every word. Radio stations played his songs constantly. Television appearances, award shows, and interviews turned him into one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment. Yet, Richie was not only a performer at that moment, he was also shaping events behind the scenes. In 1985, a humanitarian crisis in Africa captured global attention as millions faced severe famine. Music producer Quincy Jones proposed an ambitious idea: gather the most famous artists in the world to record a charity song that could raise money for relief efforts. Lionel Richie joined forces with Michael Jackson to write the song. The result was We Are the World. When recording began, the lineup of artists looked almost unbelievable. More than 40 major performers gathered in the studio, including Stevie Wonder, Bruce Springsteen, Ray Charles, Tina Turner, Bob Dylan, Billy Joel, and Diana Ross. Each singer stepped forward to record a line, creating a moment that felt historic even while it was happening. When the song was released, it quickly became a global phenomenon. The single sold over 20 million copies and raised approximately $63 million for famine relief in Africa. It remains one of the most successful charity recordings ever produced. Only 1 year later, Lionel Richie reached another career milestone. In 1986, his song, Say You, Say Me, written for the film White Nights, won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Standing on the Oscar stage, Richie had reached a level of recognition few musicians ever achieve. Within less than a decade, he had moved from a college band in Alabama to the highest honors in global entertainment. At that moment, his career seemed almost flawless. Hit songs, record-breaking album sales, Grammy victories, and Oscar and worldwide fame had all arrived in rapid succession. Yet the intensity of that success created a life that was constantly in motion. Recording sessions, international tours, interviews, award ceremonies, and endless expectations filled Richie's schedule. To the public, he appeared calm and confident, the image of a polished pop gentleman whose music carried warmth and romance. But behind the scenes, the pace of that success was beginning to place enormous pressure on both his personal life and his health, and the first cracks were already forming beneath the surface. By the late 1980s, Lionel Richie had achieved a level of fame that very few musicians ever experience. His songs dominated radio. His albums sold tens of millions of copies. His face appeared on magazine covers across the world. To the public, he looked calm, successful, and completely in control. But the private reality behind that image was becoming far more complicated. Success at that scale changes a person's life in ways that are difficult to see from the outside. Richie's schedule during the peak of his career was relentless. Global tours, recording sessions, television appearances, award shows, and promotional obligations filled nearly every day of the year. Weeks blurred together. Cities changed constantly. Sleep became irregular. Personal time almost disappeared. At the same time, his home life was slowly beginning to fracture. Lionel Richie had married Brenda Harvey in the early 1970s, long before global fame entered the picture. During the early years of the Commodores, their relationship had been stable and largely private. Brenda had supported Richie while he was still building his career, traveling through small venues and uncertain opportunities. But the transformation from struggling musician to international superstar created pressures that neither of them had anticipated. As Richie's career exploded in the 1980s, long stretches of time were spent away from home. Touring schedules meant months on the road. Recording projects and film soundtracks required even more travel. In that environment, distance began to grow inside the marriage. Around this time, Richie met a young dancer, an aspiring model named Diane Alexander. Their relationship began quietly, largely outside the view of the public. But maintaining secrecy inside a celebrity life is almost impossible. Rumors began to circulate within entertainment circles, though nothing had yet reached a level of public scandal. That changed in 1988. One night, Brenda Harvey learned that Richie was staying in an apartment in Beverly Hills where Diane Alexander was also present. According to police reports and media coverage from the time, Brenda went to the apartment to confront them. The situation escalated quickly. Brenda reportedly forced her way into the residence, and what followed became a chaotic and physical confrontation. The altercation involved shouting, physical aggression, and property damage. Neighbors called the police, and officers soon arrived at the scene. Brenda Harvey was ultimately arrested and charged with several offenses, including assault, battery, and resisting arrest. Within hours, the story spread across the entertainment press. Headlines that once celebrated Lionel Richie's romantic ballads now focused on a violent domestic scandal. The contrast between his public image and the situation unfolding in private was striking. For years, Richie had been known as the polished singer behind love songs like Hello and Endless Love. Now his name appeared in reports describing police intervention and marital collapse. The incident marked the beginning of the end of Richie's marriage. Not long afterward, he and Brenda Harvey filed for divorce. The separation became one of the most public personal crises of his career, pulling his private life directly into the spotlight. Yet while the scandal captured headlines, something even more frightening was happening inside Richie's body. Around the same period, he began experiencing persistent problems with his voice. At first, the symptoms seemed minor: hoarseness, difficulty sustaining notes, and unusual strain during performances. Many singers experience temporary vocal fatigue, especially during long tours. But Richie's condition did not improve. Instead, it gradually worsened. The discomfort turned into pain. His voice began to weaken during recording sessions. Certain notes became impossible to reach. Singing, something that had once felt effortless, suddenly required intense effort and concentration. Doctors initially suspected vocal nodules, a common injury among performers who use their voices constantly. But further examinations revealed something more serious. Richie's vocal cords were developing severe inflammation and structural damage. The strain of years of nonstop touring, recording, and public appearances had taken a heavy toll. At one point, physicians feared that the damage might be connected to throat cancer. That possibility forced Richie into a terrifying period of uncertainty. For a singer, the voice is not just a skill. It is identity, career, and emotional expression all at once. The idea that he might permanently lose the ability to sing threatened to erase everything he had built. The diagnosis eventually shifted away from cancer, but the conclusion was still alarming. Doctors determined that Richie's vocal cord damage was strongly linked to chronic stress and overuse. The intense pressure of fame, combined with years of relentless work, had pushed his body beyond its limits. Surgery became unavoidable. Richie underwent a series of delicate vocal cord surgeries designed to repair the damage and restore proper function. These procedures required long periods of recovery. In some cases, he was forced into near-complete silence so that the vocal cords could heal. For someone whose entire career depended on his voice, those months were psychologically difficult. During this time, Lionel Richie largely disappeared from the music scene. To the public, it looked like the superstar who had dominated the mid-1980s had suddenly faded away. The charts moved on. New musical styles began to take over the industry. Hip-hop was rising. Rock and alternative music were changing the sound of radio. While Richie fought privately to recover his voice, the landscape of pop music was shifting rapidly. Emotionally, this period forced him to confront a new reality. Fame had once moved quickly and smoothly, like a constant upward climb. Now everything had slowed down. The certainty that had defined his earlier success was gone. In its place came vulnerability and reflection. Richie later described this phase of his life as a moment when he had to rethink everything, not just his career, but his priorities. For years, his identity had been built around achievement. Hit records, sold-out tours, awards, and global recognition. Now he was facing the possibility that those achievements might never return in the same way. But the surgeries eventually succeeded. Slowly, cautiously, Lionel Richie began to regain control of his voice. The recovery was not immediate, and it did not instantly restore his previous momentum in the industry, yet it proved that his career was not over. The voice that had once carried millions of listeners through love songs and ballads had survived its most dangerous moment, and with that survival came the beginning of a different chapter, one where Lionel Richie would no longer chase the same relentless pace that had nearly destroyed him. When Lionel Richie finally began to recover from the surgeries on his vocal cords, the world around him had already changed. Nearly a decade had passed since the peak years of Can't Slow Down, and the music industry of the 1990s looked very different from the one he had dominated in the mid-1980s. Radio stations were now filled with new sounds. Hip-hop, alternative rock, and grunge were reshaping popular culture. Artists like Nirvana, Dr. Dre, and Mariah Carey represented a new generation of voices that defined the era. For Richie, returning to the spotlight meant entering a completely different landscape. But the most important shift was happening inside him. The years of illness, divorce, and public scandal had forced Richie to slow down in a way he never had before. During the height of his success, life had moved at an almost uncontrollable speed. Every album cycle meant another tour, another promotion schedule, another wave of expectations. When the surgeries forced him into silence, he suddenly had time to reflect on what that pace had cost him. Recovery required patience. Richie had to relearn how to use his voice carefully. Recording sessions were shorter. Performances were more controlled. Doctors warned him that pushing too hard could damage the vocal cords again. This new reality meant that the kind of non-stop touring schedule he had once maintained was no longer possible. In 1992, Richie released the album Back to Front. The record was partly a collection of his greatest hits and partly new material. It served as a signal to audiences that he was still present, still capable of writing and performing the kind of songs that had made him famous. The album performed strongly in international markets, particularly in Europe, where fans had remained loyal during his years of absence. But Richie understood that the center of the industry had moved on. Instead of trying to compete directly with younger artists and new trends, he began reshaping his approach to music. The focus shifted from dominating charts to sustaining a career that could last for decades. This shift also affected his personal life. In the years following a divorce from Brenda Harvey, Richie eventually married Diane Alexander, the woman whose relationship with him had once triggered the scandal that shook his reputation. Their marriage brought children and a more settled family environment. Fatherhood became an important part of Richie's identity during this period, grounding him in ways that constant touring had never allowed. At the same time, Richie began to rediscover the role of songwriting rather than simply performing. Throughout the industry, his reputation as a composer of timeless melodies remained strong. Even when he was not dominating the charts himself, other artists respected his ability to craft songs that connected emotionally with audiences. The late 1990s and early 2000s slowly revealed another kind of revival. Richie's music had never been tied to a single trend. Songs like Hello, Endless Love, and All Night Long had become part of popular culture itself. As new generations discovered these songs through radio, film, and television, his catalog began to gain a second life. Concert audiences reflected this shift. Instead of chasing the newest hits, fans came to hear the songs that had defined earlier decades. Richie leaned into that role. His performances became celebrations of musical history, rather than attempts to prove relevance in a constantly changing market. This transition required humility. The man who had once been at the absolute center of pop culture had to accept a different position, not as the newest voice in the industry, but as one of its enduring storytellers. Yet, that change also brought a surprising freedom. Without the pressure to constantly outperform his previous successes, Lionel Richie could approach music in a way that felt calmer and more personal. The voice that had nearly been lost was still there, and the songs that once defined an era were now being sung by audiences that spanned generations. What had once looked like the end of a superstar career was slowly transforming into something else, a long, steady second life built not on momentum, but on legacy. By the early 2000s, Lionel Richie was no longer the dominant chart force he had been in the 1980s. But something else was happening. His music had begun to move into a different category. Not just popular songs of a certain moment, but classics that survived time. New artists were constantly emerging. Trends were changing faster than ever. Yet songs like Hello, Endless Love, and All Night Long continued to appear in films, television shows, weddings, and radio playlists around the world. Richie understood this shift. Instead of fighting to compete with younger artists for radio space, he leaned into the strength of his catalog. His concerts became celebrations of an entire era of pop and R&B music. Audiences were no longer just fans from the 1980s. Many of them were younger listeners who had discovered his songs through their parents, through movies, or through streaming platforms that introduced classic music to new generations. In 2006, Richie released the album Coming Home. The project deliberately returned to his R&B and soul roots, reconnecting him with the musical influences that had shaped his earliest years. The album performed strongly on the Billboard charts and reached the top positions on the R&B rankings, proving that Richie could still create relevant music decades into his career. At the same time, his reputation inside the industry continued to grow. Younger musicians frequently cited him as an influence, particularly for his ability to write melodies that felt both simple and emotionally powerful. His songs were studied not only as pop hits, but as examples of how songwriting could cross genres and generations. Recognition for his contributions followed. Over the years, Lionel Richie received multiple lifetime honors, celebrating the impact of his work. Perhaps the most symbolic moment arrived in 2022, when he was officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The induction acknowledged not just the commercial success of his music, but also the way his songs had shaped popular culture for more than 4 decades. By that point, the numbers behind his career told an extraordinary story. Lionel Richie had helped sell more than 100 million records worldwide. His catalog included multiple Grammy Awards, an Academy Award, and dozens of international honors. Yet statistics alone did not fully explain his legacy. What truly defined Richie's place in music history was the emotional simplicity of his songs. His melodies often sounded effortless, but they carried a warmth that made them accessible to almost anyone. Love songs like Hello and Endless Love became part of the soundtrack of everyday life for millions of people. The young man who once played saxophone in a college band in Alabama had become something else entirely. Not just a pop star of a particular decade, but a songwriter whose music continued to travel across generations, long after the charts had moved on. Looking back at Lionel Richie's life, the contrast is striking. Few artists experience a rise as smooth and powerful as his during the 1980s. In less than a decade, he moved from a college band in Alabama to the center of global pop culture. His albums sold tens of millions of copies. His songs dominated radio. He won Grammy Awards, an Academy Award, and helped create one of the most influential charity songs ever recorded. From the outside, it looked like the perfect career. But behind that success was a quieter story that most audiences never saw. Fame arrived with pressure that slowly built over time. Long tours, endless expectations, and the constant demand to stay at the top placed enormous strain on his personal life and his health. A public marriage collapse turned private pain into headlines. At the same time, the voice that defined his career nearly disappeared. For a singer, losing the ability to sing is not just a professional problem. It is the loss of identity. Lionel Richie survived that moment. The surgeries worked. The voice returned. But the experience changed the way he approached his life and career. The man who once raced through success at full speed eventually learned to slow down. And in the end, what remains is not the scandal or the setbacks. It is the music. Decades after they were written, songs like Hello, Endless Love, and All Night Long are still being played around the world. Quiet reminders that even behind the brightest moments of fame, the real legacy often lives in the work itself.